Yanze Khenpo Sodargye Donen Molam Khenpo Ngakya Bangar Dangon Zanto Shirmurdo Tomba Dikji Janla Gi Shamsar Nachar Zergi Jagamsar Jawar Tiki Jano Yila Jimmy Benzo Zhang Lang Sorande Gurti Toban Pora Shinjilo.
Profound and subtle Dharma is rarely encountered in eons. Now we hear and follow it. May we realize the Tathagata's meaning. To liberate beings, please generate bodhicitta before teaching. Now let's continue our in-depth study of the Sigalovada Sutra. Yesterday we only briefly touched upon some of the translators, also explored the reasoning of its various different versions, some of the core principles related to this. I gave everyone a brief introduction. As for how many sessions this scripture will take to cover, I don't know myself, so there's no need for everyone to worry. As long as we study a bit every day, that's enough. I'm not in a hurry either. I'll just teach as much as I can each day. Sometimes I might cover a bit more, sometimes I might cover a bit less. Earlier we talked about the Sigalovada Sutra. The Sigalovada Sutra, spoken by Buddha, was spoken directly by the Buddha. Whether it's the captivating story of the youth Shansheng or the valuable teachings given to him, and then the significant word sutra at the very end. Sutra fundamentally means a classic, a Buddhist scripture. This particular sutra is quite different from the usual worldly treatises or common articles, or even the general meaning of some ordinary books. Generally speaking, in the vast realm of Buddhism, there are sutras and also tantras. In the Vajrayana tradition, these texts are called tantras. In the exoteric tradition, they are referred to as sutras. For the most part, this is the case, though it's not absolutely fixed. The scriptures of Vajrayana, if we directly derive the meaning from the Sanskrit, are called duo in Tibetan. The meaning of duo is actually quite broad and encompasses a wide range of profound concepts. Many great masters of the past have provided various and extensive explanations and interpretations. The word sutra in Buddhist scriptures has many meanings. There are roughly 10 different meanings. Here I'll very briefly explain them to all of you. The first meaning is called the springing forth meaning. Just like a natural spring, water gushes forth with water. That is to say, the content within the sutras, whether it's the elaboration of words and phrases, if you were to explain it, it would be inexhaustible, endless. Just like a sweet flowing spring, it never truly runs dry. This is the very first meaning. The second significant meaning is the generating meaning. It means that many virtuous and excellent qualities arise from deep within it. It also refers to the meaning of adopting and rejecting, the meaning of cause and effect. So after we study the sutras, we come to understand principles that we didn't know before. This is the meaning of generating. Then the third is the revealing meaning. Within the Buddhist scriptures, many principles are clearly revealed. Sometimes these fundamental principles are eloquently explained in the engaging form of captivating stories. Other times they are presented through very profound and subtle theories that require deep contemplation. Sometimes they are extremely deep and complex, such as the meanings found in prajna and so on. So many different and varied principles are clearly displayed. Now, the fourth significant principle is specifically called the standardizing meaning. In the past, when skilled carpenters meticulously did any woodworking, they would carefully dip a string into a dark ink and then use this precisely inked string as a reliable reference for achieving proper balance. In other words, we must clearly distinguish between what is right and what is wrong, consciously choosing the right and actively eliminating the wrong. We need to discern correct principles from erroneous ones. Just like in the Sigalovada Sutra, for example, it thoroughly discusses over 100 different small principles, all designed to help our behavior turn from what is wrong to what is truly right. There is also this kind of balancing line, you could say. The fifth is called the threading meaning. Actually, in Buddhist scriptures, different contents are threaded together. They're all on a single line. For example, like the sacred prayer beads we meticulously wear, or the vibrant garlands of many different colors, especially during the warm summer months. We have white, red, and all kinds of flower garlands strung together. and when we wear them, they look very beautiful, right? This is the meaning of threading things together. The sixth meaning is called the supporting meaning. Support as in to uphold. That is to say, it allows all sentient beings not to fall into truly bad realms. Support in this context means to temporarily guide them toward good realms and ultimately attain complete nirvana. It has the meaning of protection or support. The seventh meaning is called the eternal meaning. The truths spoken of in Buddhist scriptures are unchanging and eternal throughout the ages. If we look at worldly books on politics or economics, perhaps for a certain period of time, these principles are very effective, but after some period of time, they no longer seem to work. Just like some political books around the world, when the rulers of the time are truly in power and their ideas are extremely popular, but once that particular ruler is gone, many of the ideas in those very books need to be carefully revised or completely removed. The eighth meaning is called the Dharma meaning. As for the so-called Dharma meaning, all the true teachings spoken by Buddhas and Bodhisattvas are truths. The teachings spoken by all Buddhas of the three times are not different. For example, when we talk about the Four Noble Truths or the 12 links of dependent origination, no matter which Buddha expounded them, they all stand up to theoretical scrutiny and the test of time. Next, the ninth meaning is precisely called the canonical meaning. In fact, what is thoroughly explained here is absolutely correct and completely reliable, no matter how you examine it. Ultimately, it contains very profound meaning. The final meaning is called the sutra meaning. It can also be described as a kind of liberation or a path. By relying on such sutras, by relying on this kind of path, sentient beings can be freed from samsara, reach the other shore of nirvana, and attain the ultimate fruition. This is also the kind of meaning that can be attained through relying on the scriptures. So, all of you who are present here today are now studying the sacred scriptures. When we carefully study these scriptures, we should not think that, oh, all books are exactly the same. There are some enchanting fairy tale books. And the textbooks we usually use in our courses, maybe they are the same. Some people might think this way. But in actual fact, those of us who truly possess genuine faith and wisdom, when we slowly and gradually explore, only in the process of exploration do we realize that some of our books, on the surface, perhaps a book from the Buddhist scriptures, seems the same as some books written by other wise people or individuals. They appear to be the same, but in terms of the content, there is actually a truly huge and very significant difference. So, in the future, when it specifically comes to understanding the fundamental principles of Buddhist scriptures, and regarding the meaning of Buddhist scriptures, it is imperative that we cultivate a deep and comprehensive understanding. In this manner, your unwavering faith and conviction in these sacred scriptures will also become truly unique. Why is it that some of our texts, like the Diamond Sutra or the Heart Sutra, as well as the Medicine Buddha Sutra and so on, seem so incredibly brief and fleeting on the surface, yet even after the passage of so many years, people are still consistently quoting them, and in the ongoing process of quoting them, they truly have an incredible and direct impact on us. This is something that can be directly observed, you could say. This is how it is for me personally. For example, when my state of mind is not very comfortable, or at times like that, I start to recite a scripture myself, a sacred text, whether I recite it myself or have the monastic community recite it, perhaps because of my own faith. For those of you who do not have faith, maybe you don't have this kind of feeling or response, but for me, it seems that the afflictions in my mind, including greed, anger, ignorance, and all kinds of suffering and distress, after reciting this sutra, there is an immediate effect. In this regard, I sincerely hope that everyone should use your own wisdom to analyze it. Scriptures are distinctly different from other worldly books. Next, let's talk about a common and significant phrase. In scriptures, there is usually the well-known phrase, "Thus have I heard." At one time, the Buddha, the enlightened one, was staying at Rajagriha, specifically on the sacred Vulture Peak. He was accompanied by a great assembly of 1,250 bhikshus, fully ordained monks, dedicated to the Dharma. Here, within these teachings, we often discuss the 5 perfections. The opening phrase, "Thus have I heard," is considered to embody the perfection of Dharma, signifying the authentic transmission of the Buddha's teachings. At one time is the perfection of time. The Buddha is the perfection of the ultimate teacher. Rajagriha refers to the city of Rajagriha. Vulture Peak refers to Grudrakuta mountain. Rajagriha and Vulture Peak are the perfection of place. Then, the great assembly of 1,250 bhikshus is the perfection of retinue. In this section, we could say that it's just like when people in the world write a narrative essay, the 5 elements, time, place, people, events, and so on, must all be complete. It's the same in the mundane world. Likewise, Buddhist scriptures also explicitly require this. It specifies precisely who is with whom and in what particular place. At what time, doing what, and what event is taking place. These elements must be present. So, here, we first need to understand under what circumstances was this sutra established. Thus have I heard. The Dharma is of perfection. At the end, I will explain at one time, as for the perfection of time. As previously mentioned, according to ancient Indian tradition, actually, the Indian concept of time is not precisely the same as that of the Western world. Their traditional understanding is indeed like this. However, here, because the Buddha was teaching in the human realm, perhaps the time in the heavenly realms and the time and concepts of other beings are not necessarily the same. So, at one time does not refer to a specific time. And as for Rajagriha and Vulture Peak, everyone knows about them. Rajagriha was a large city where the Buddha resided for quite a long time. It is still located in central India today. The distance between Rajagriha and Vulture Peak is extremely close. As for Vulture Peak, some historical accounts say that there were many vultures there, because when people from Rajagriha passed away, there was a sky burial site located right next to the prominent Vulture Peak. Those vultures would often come down, consume human corpses, and then return to the mountain. It's just like our own sky burial platforms. Many of the vultures stay at the Dharma Protector platform and spend the night there. Some birds fly over, while others simply just live there permanently. So ours could also be accurately called a little vulture peak. There is such a saying. Also, the shape of the entire mountain is said to resemble a vulture as well. There are such explanations, but in any case, Vulture Peak, also widely known as Grudrakuta Mountain, was actually the place where the Buddha gave many profound teachings. The Lotus Sutra, the Prajnaparamita Sutras, and many other scriptures were all taught by the Buddha at this place. As for the Buddha himself, everyone knows about him, so I don't need to elaborate here. And then, his retinue, there were a total of 1,250 great bhikshus. So regarding the 1,250, actually it's not just in this particular scripture, in many other sutras as well, the number of people is relatively fixed. Especially when the Buddha was teaching at Vulture Peak, this particular number was quite consistent. There is a commentary on a specific sutra, which is called the Straw Sutra. I forget who wrote it. In it, regarding the Buddha's retinue at that particular time, why was it 1,250? There is a reason for this. Because when the Buddha attained enlightenment, he accepted the 3 Kashyapa brothers. The first was called Uruvilva Kashyapa, who had a significant number of 500 followers. Then the second of the disciples was called Nadakashyapa. Nadakashyapa had 250 followers. Then there was Gayakashyapa. Gayakashyapa also had 250 followers. So the 3 brothers' followers together totaled approximately 1,000 people. In addition to this, the Venerable Shariputra and Maudgalyayana also had 250 devoted followers. So the number of 1,250 people became relatively fixed. Many ancient scriptures often mention this particular reason. During the period when the Buddha turned the Dharma wheel for the third time, the reason why the number of followers in many scriptures is fixed is also because of this. It's just like the number of people at Larungar, basically. During this period, the number of people has already been determined just like that. Just as the Buddha in different places, when turning different Dharma wheels, would have such a retinue. This is an introduction regarding the retinue. Then, as we just discussed, the perfection of Dharma, thus have I heard. As for thus have I heard, this particular phrase should have been compiled by Ananda. Now, regarding the compilers, because they had already attained the Dharan of non-forgetting, and even some who had not attained the Dharan of non-forgetting, however, he was able to remember and recall all the teachings the Buddha meticulously gave at that specific time. So, all the extensive content in the following sutra text at that time, he reliably relied on his own truly unique wisdom, and diligently recorded it all, completely and accurately. In this way, what was recorded as thus was exactly as it was, without any distortion. That is to say, absolutely nothing was added or omitted. Whatever the Buddha himself said, I recorded it just as it was spoken. Everything he heard was recorded in full. Actually, this is extremely precious and invaluable. These venerable arhats, these devoted disciples of the Buddha, if they hadn't meticulously recorded it at that crucial time, then indeed, after the Buddha departed from this earthly world, perhaps in this human realm, we wouldn't have such an immense and vast and a richly diverse and extensive collection of sacred scriptures and profound sutras. So it was because they recorded it in this way, and also when the Buddha was approaching nirvana, he also permitted and said that at the beginning it could be stated as, thus have I heard at one time, and so on. And later on, things like the praises of the Buddha by Devas, Nagas, and Yakshas, and so on. These are scriptures that have already been permitted. So what do I want to say here? In the past, whether it was these arhats or bodhisattvas, the kindness and merits of these great accomplished beings have already been recorded. The extremely great Buddha's very, very precious teachings like these are also especially supreme. Because of this, in the future, we too should likewise, including very recently, I've also made an appeal here at Larungar, stating that if some of our Dharma teachers are indeed quite good at teaching and expounding the Dharma, their devoted disciples can also meticulously record their actual spoken words, and then carefully compile them into some comprehensive books. Doing so would also be very good. Of course, some may not teach that well. So, in such particular cases, it may not be entirely necessary to record them right away. But for some, it has already been many years, and they are also very familiar with the scriptures and treatises, and are outstanding in various aspects. Therefore, some important works should be carefully preserved. Books are still very much important, primarily because I feel that the inherent power of books can benefit countless generations to come. If we talk about a single person, a person can at most live a little over 100 years. Our physical bodies, made of the four elements, will ultimately have to turn to nothingness. But if we become books, they may be passed down from generation to generation like this. Not only books, but also audio, video, and some photographs. These are all truly important. A reporter once asked me, during the time you relied on your teacher, what do you regret the most? I said, what I regret the most, it is that moment when I was with my esteemed teacher. I actually had a long period of opportunity, but at the time I always thought the teacher would always be there, that there was nothing to worry about. So even when my teacher made a joke or said something casually, I didn't write it down. Now I feel a bit regretful about this. If I had all the audio, video, and complete materials in this regard, perhaps even a single sentence from my teacher would not be lost to this world, and its wisdom would endure. If it could be preserved, then for sentient beings of different capacities, it could be beneficial to all of them. I might think this sentence is not important, but perhaps for other beings it could be helpful to them. Maybe for the sentient beings of my era, it doesn't have much significance. But for future generations, after 100 years, 10 years, or even thousands or tens of thousands of years, perhaps it could be very meaningful for them. So sometimes, whether it's great masters or teachers, including some valuable teachings from their parents and guidance. If these are carefully preserved, they are indeed very meaningful. However, perhaps the traditional customs and cultural practices in many Asian countries are a bit different from those in some Western countries. As for the Western countries in general, for example, a private library, it might be several hundred years old, a private, personal, and very old library. Or even a private collection of photographs, they have been preserved all along. But for us, many of these things simply don't exist. There's a big gap in this regard. In the past, the Guru visited many places, but later it seems that when he visited the West, in every Dharma center, even if the Guru just spoke a few simple teachings to a few dozen people, they could all be found in their archives and can still be retrieved now. Back then, when we went to the United States, including Canada, and also to France and many other places, even Singapore is a bit better in this regard. It's possible there too. Whether it's photos, audio, or video, everything can be preserved. But in places like India, it was a bit better in the past, especially with these classic texts. But today it's not particularly good. When His Holiness went to India and meticulously taught the commentary on the 7-line prayer, White Lotus, a truly significant text, even within the extensive archives of the revered Namdroling Monastery, it was only a partial, incomplete version. And when we brought it back at that particular time, it was actually quite troublesome to bring it back, because when passing through customs, none of those audio tapes were actually allowed. So what we did with the tapes back then was, what do you call that inside the tape? We unwound the tape, put it inside a skirt, and sewed it in with thread. That's how we brought it back. After returning, some were complete, while others were missing parts. At that time, we did pay some attention to it, but in reality, it still wasn't quite enough. Now, in the ongoing process of what we're doing, it also seems rather incomplete, lacking crucial details. So sometimes perhaps in the future, it doesn't necessarily have to be someone truly great, a historical figure of immense renown, but even materials related to ourselves, our individual experiences, or from the Dharma Center, such as teachings or community insights. Even if it's just a simple piece of data, it would still be quite interesting to keep it for future reference. Some time ago, we found some certificates of listening to the Dharma from more than 10 or even 20 years ago. Some of the books I used back then now seem to possess a much deeper and more meaning when I carefully examine them. The materials that we currently possess, as well as the valuable materials obtained from other Dharma centers, if these significant kinds of archives are preserved continuously, it is actually a very good and beneficial practice. For example, Westerners, Germans in particular, are extremely meticulous and precise in their approach to tasks. Just look at the time of World War II. Every single individual person who was involved in the horrific killing of Jewish people back then was basically meticulously recorded by them in such terrible situations. There's a very special memorial hall located in Jerusalem. That solemn memorial hall meticulously contains the names and photographs of the many individuals who were tragically killed by the Germans during that historical period. When they were about to carry out an execution, they would first carefully measure that person's height, where it happened and under what circumstances. Later, the Israeli authorities successfully managed to obtain some of those records from Germany. However, some of them they absolutely refused to hand over. But some were released, and after they were released, they were all carefully placed in a memorial hall in Jerusalem. The inside is triangular in shape. All the numerous photos are prominently displayed there. Approximately 1/3 of these precious photos still haven't been successfully found. I've unfortunately forgotten the precise number. It's meticulously recorded in my personal diary. Then, in the very middle, there's flowing water, and directly underneath this, there is solid earth. The shadows of these photos are always reflected in the water. That water is the water of the Jewish people. It means that those who have passed away, they will forever rest in their own cherished homeland, in our beloved hometown, for all eternity. They will always be deeply connected to our hearts, forming an enduring bond. That's also precisely what it truly means. When I personally went to see it, it truly felt as though they were within such a captivating setting. Even though this event is a very cruel chapter of history, a massacre, they still choose to document it, including truly all the positive aspects and things like what happened in Asia, such as many events during the Nanjing massacre by the Japanese at that time. Perhaps they are unwilling to provide information about those. Now, neither side can find particularly good evidence, truly. Therefore, sometimes we might discover that the meticulous preservation and careful archiving of historical records and important documents is also an incredibly meaningful and profoundly significant endeavor. Maybe in the first 10 or so years, in our college, when it comes to architecture, it might seem meaningless now at this point in time. But if we keep all the materials from these projects, including some of the design drawings, if we keep all of these, it would be great. When I went to Foguangshan in Taiwan, at that time, Master Xing Yun had just started building the Buddha Memorial Center for them. The Buddha Memorial Center is an extremely large building, and on the first day, what kind of teacups they used, what hall was here, what hall was there. They took photos of these as the very beginning of the true actual origin of the story. Sometimes the true significance of preserving these things is not only found in the Buddhist scriptures, but also very much in our own everyday lives. What usually seems like a very simple thing might actually be very important. A few years ago, there was a lay practitioner I knew well whose daughter went to study in the United States. She asked me, "Khenpo, what should I mainly do when I go to the US? What is the most meaningful thing in my life?" I said, "You're young, so you might not listen to me. But if you do listen to me, when you go to the US," she was going to study at university for 4 years. I told her, "Whatever you do each day, write it down in your notebook. Then after 4 years, no matter whether you return home or go somewhere else, maybe it will be something meaningful in your life." But later, I never saw her again. So she definitely didn't keep a record. That's precisely why sometimes the important things we meticulously record should be truly meaningful. Here, when we talk about "thus have I heard," for example, it signifies that these arhats meticulously recorded precisely what they personally heard. We too, whether it's about the teachings and wisdom of highly eminent monks and revered great masters, or about history, should accurately record these important things. If we leave these records behind, they become a truly precious and invaluable treasure for all future generations. Of course, when carefully recording, I've noticed that some people, when making lecture notes, do some editing and polishing at this stage, which is all very good. But during the process of recording, it's best to be as complete as possible. That's better. Otherwise, if you take things out of context, breaking them into segments, sometimes that is perfectly acceptable and indeed quite fine, especially when creating concise summaries, and it is also entirely appropriate to succinctly summarize the more important and crucial points. But at other times, because some specific cases or principles, if you were to cut them into smaller pieces in the very middle, the content being conveyed might be compromised or subtly altered to some extent. In this particular regard, you can carefully decide based on your own unique and specific situation and circumstances. So what are we going to talk about next? Today, at this very point, what we discuss is, at that time the world-honored one, when the time had come, put on his monastic robe, took up his alms bowl, and then entered the city to beg for food. As mentioned earlier, the Buddha was residing on Vulture Peak. Once, around noon, the Buddha carefully put on his monastic robe, then wore his kasaya, and humbly took up his alms bowl. He then proceeded to Rajagriha, entering the city. There he manifested the sacred act of going on alms round. I'd like to say something more about this part. Many of us, when it comes to the Buddha's traditional practice of alms begging, or to put it another way, even today in Theravada Buddhism, this very good tradition is still carefully preserved and maintained. Some people genuinely feel that this practice is profoundly meaningful and significant, and that devout Buddhists should strive to be like them and must do it this way. But some people wonder, why is it like this? What is the point of doing something that seems like begging? So in this regard, especially when the Buddha himself went on alms round, there are many profound meanings. I'm not sure if I've talked about this before. There's a text called the Vajra Immortal Treatise. It says it's by Master Vasubandhu. It was written by his disciple. In India, there is an exposition on the Dhamma Sutra. In it, it is explicitly mentioned that the Buddha's alms begging actually has many, many truly profound and diverse significant meanings. So what kind of meanings does it have? At that particular time, when he went on his daily alms round, just like this actually, within the bustling city,
Some people, upon seeing the Buddha's truly dignified and majestic appearance, immediately developed profound faith in him and gave rise to bodhicitta. There were also some people who were originally lacking in the 5 faculties, such as the deaf and mute. But because of the Buddha's extraordinary and profound wisdom and the boundless power of his merit, truly miraculous transformations occurred. The deaf could distinctly hear, the blind could clearly see forms, the lame could walk with newfound strength and freedom, and so on. Their lives underwent profound and lasting changes. Therefore, they would give rise to the bodhicitta. There were also some individuals, including certain officials and great benefactors, who were originally arrogant, but after meeting the Buddha, their immense arrogance was completely subdued. Their minds matured and they developed bodhicitta. There were also some, for example, in India, who could protect women. Why do I say this? Because at that time, the social situation in India was quite unique, with a strong preference for men over women. The preference for men over women was quite severe. This is also why, in some Buddhist scriptures today, there are slight tendencies in this regard. After all, Buddhism existed in such an environment in India. If it did not adapt to the world, the teachings of Buddhism would not have been able to benefit sentient beings. Therefore, the Buddha often said in the scriptures, I adapt to the world. When worldly people argue with me, I do not argue with them. Whatever they do, I also go along with it. In this way, some young women were often controlled by their parents when they were young and consequently had no way to go outside. Then, after growing up, they were subsequently controlled by their husbands and still had no way to go outside. Then, when they grew old, they were controlled by their children. So for some women, large events and activities outside, they never had the opportunity to see any of these things and would always remain at home. At such times, the compassionate Buddha personally came to their very doorsteps. These sentient beings, through their karmic connections, were able to see the Buddha's noble face. Afterwards, a significant seed was carefully planted in their mental continuum, and they gave rise to the unsurpassed bodhicitta. There were such cases. Moreover, when the Buddha entered the city to beg for alms, in fact, many celestial beings would often make offerings. When others witnessed such scenes, they too would give rise to bodhicitta. There were also some very poor people indeed. And when these poor people saw the Buddha's alms bowl, it seemed that the alms bowl was basically full, but there was still a little space left inside. They could add just a little more. This gave them the opportunity to accumulate merit. And when affluent and prosperous individuals observed the Buddha's alms bowl, they noticed it was completely empty within, creating an inviting space for them to generously offer even more. Consequently, both the less fortunate and the very wealthy, each in their own distinct way, discovered a sense of contentment and satisfaction. So in this way, all sentient beings were gently guided and ultimately liberated from their suffering. Indeed, this matter has been explained in great detail. Originally, the Buddha had already attained the supreme and boundless samadhi of the treasury of space. If he truly wished to obtain it, he could instantly and effortlessly acquire all the sustenance and nourishment, all the food he desired and wanted without any limitation. Moreover, the Buddha's Vajra body was not sustained by the food of the human world, but in order to benefit sentient beings, to benefit different beings with karmic connections, he manifested himself in the city, going on alms rounds in this way. So, in the future, whenever we mention the Buddha going for alms, whether others ask about it or not, we should gently remind ourselves, oh, the Buddha going for alms brings many wonderful and meaningful benefits, offering blessings and positive influence to countless beings along the way. Entering the city has such significance. Actually, I think it's not just the Buddha. Many great monks and accomplished masters as well, including our own precious and revered guru, have also traveled to various countries and many different cities and later greatly benefited countless sentient beings in those specific places. For example, when the esteemed His Holiness went to the sacred Mount Wutai, I often thought at the time, if they had not gone to Mount Wutai,
The karmic connections with many Buddhist practitioners in the Han region might not exist to this very day, including some of our esteemed Dharma friends, whether they had ordained or taken lay precepts. If they had not received this particular lineage, perhaps even today, they wouldn't have had this karmic connection and would still be drifting in the vast ocean of suffering. This is entirely possible. So such karmic connections should be valued. We ourselves may not be truly accomplished beings or anything of that particular nature, but sometimes karmic connections are truly inconceivable. For example, when I go to some schools or similar places, it seems that I often form genuinely positive connections with certain individuals. So the other day someone said, "No, we have a villa in a certain place." They invited me to go and stay there for a few days. I said, "The villa doesn't really attract me, but if it's to visit a school, then I would definitely go." Sometimes when the conditions are absolutely right, I go to schools or even prisons. Although as for those in prison, for now I don't really have a way to guide them. But the main thing is to plant some virtuous roots for them. As for other intellectuals, I also visit them from time to time. Of course, when I go to some schools, I'm not there to spread Buddhism. What am I sharing then? I'm sharing culture. I share various kinds of knowledge that are relevant to them. That is to say, things like ethics, the humanities, and so on. Sometimes I even talk to them about the fascinating subject of artificial intelligence. I often discuss some of the various fields I've diligently studied as a devoted Buddhist. When I communicate with them, we also have some common and shared topics. In this way, each and every one of us, everyone here today, and in the future as well, on the surface, it may seem like you're just going somewhere, but in reality, you should make a vow in your heart that if the sentient beings who reside there can genuinely benefit from our actions, then whatever actions we undertake can also make us followers of the Buddha. The Buddha has already realized the non-self of persons and phenomena, while we are still far from that level. But as Buddhists, we can still endeavor to emulate some of the Buddha's noble and compassionate actions. Perhaps there are some things we can do. Maybe in the process of doing these things, we will encounter others' lack of understanding or all kinds of misunderstandings from others. This is a real possibility. In the distant past, the comprehensive chronicle of the Buddha explicitly mentioned that when the Buddha went out to beg for sustenance, he entered a city and went to a Brahmin's house. After a little while, the Brahmin became quite annoyed. He felt as if he owed the Buddha a debt that needed to be repaid. "You come here almost every single day. What exactly is the true meaning of all of this?" The Buddha then recited a verse to him. What did it mean? "When the timely rain falls again and again, the grains will ripen again and again." This means that if the gentle spring rain falls repeatedly and consistently, then many, many abundant crops will mature and flourish. As the saying goes, if one repeatedly cultivates virtuous and commendable deeds, one will repeatedly receive the corresponding and well-deserved rewards. If some individuals continuously accumulate merit and good karma, then the truly remarkable beneficial results they will inevitably receive will also be extraordinarily abundant. After the Buddha meticulously recited this profound verse to him, it became clear that the Brahmin was indeed quite receptive to the wisdom being imparted. Later, he truly realized that it was indeed true, that someone as profound as the Buddha had come to his humble home, and that having such a significant karmic connection, yet not making a proper and respectful offering was not good at all. He felt a profound sense of deep regret and sincerely repented for his actions. Subsequently, when he diligently practiced and followed the teachings of the Buddha, he eventually attained the noble and enlightened fruit of his spiritual efforts. So at this point, we can also observe and truly understand this. When we indeed encounter sentient beings with the very right karmic connection, we should keep trying repeatedly. If we don't succeed the first time, we are committed to trying a second time, even diligently visiting their homes every single day. Some of our dedicated Dharma friends consistently call or message certain people every day, until eventually those people get really annoyed and immediately add their names to the blacklist. This kind of situation also happens. Of course, it's still very important for us to use skillful means and methods. Otherwise, it really is the case that it was like this in ancient times and it's the same in modern times. Sometimes there are all kinds of wrong views in the world. There's also something called the Sutra of the Wondrous and Excellent Jeweled Chariot. The Sutra of the Wondrous and Excellent Jeweled Chariot can also be found among the ancient books of Dunhuang. It's said to be included in Japan's Taisho Tripitaka, but it's not found in the Chinese canon, nor has it been found in the Tibetan canon. There's a very good and insightful analogy in it. So what exactly is it? Once upon a time, when the Buddha went to a Brahmin's house, the Brahmin was not pleased either. He said, "You don't farm yourself, so why do you come here every day to beg for food? You should farm the land just like we do. Work hard on your own labor." Then the Buddha said, "I do in fact truly farm the land, but the way I farm is a bit different from yours." "What kind of farming do I do?" He said, "I cultivate the barren field of ignorance, a vast and challenging expanse. I diligently use the powerful plow of the four dhyanas, the profound plow of deep meditation, to begin the essential process of clearing it. Then I plant the precious seeds of the 6 paramitas. If you cultivate these spiritual crops in this dedicated and mindful way, in the end, the abundant and profound harvest of the Buddha's ultimate nirvana and immeasurable merit can fully ripen." So, as we have discussed and explored in previous teachings, we've talked about this fundamental principle before as well. Some people say, these Buddhists, especially these monastics, appear to not engage in any conventional work every single day. Instead, they seem to rely entirely and continuously on the generous offerings provided by others all the time. This situation undeniably adds significant pressure to us ordinary people. In actual fact, this complex issue can be understood from 2 distinct perspectives. On one hand, if you don't have faith, you could say this. But on the other hand, when it comes to worldly labor, there is distinct mental labor, and there is also physical labor. Some dedicated practitioners often rely on a certain profound kind of wisdom. In fact, practitioners are not just simply sleeping in every day. I've noticed that recently, among our Tibetan lamas, they all go to the prayer hall as early as 5 in the morning. Many classes start at 6 o'clock. I'm not quite sure if it's exactly the same here in our case with us. Maybe in some places it is. Some people just can't get up in the morning and keep on dreaming. I've heard that some classes are quite strict. If you're late, there are punishments and so on, which is actually good. It's still incredibly important to be a bit more diligent and attentive, especially during the warmer seasons of summer and spring, when our minds are often at their absolute sharpest and most active. This is particularly true for some of you younger individuals. Back when we were studying and contemplating, we were actually quite diligent. Now that we've reached this stage in life, we can still be considered fairly hardworking. We've never really let ourselves get too distracted. We've always kept working hard. So, especially for young people, this time is incredibly precious. You should make use of it to memorize and recite what you need to. Yesterday, I received some compelling footage of students at the Buddhist Academy diligently reciting sacred texts at night. It's truly the case that there are still many individuals who are studying with great diligence even now, so this is also a significant form of labor for us. It's not as if what we are doing all day long is utterly meaningless. We are genuinely working for the overall well-being of the human mind and its flourishing, because nowadays many people are truly suffering greatly in their hearts. If through our own dedicated practice and careful study, we can gain something ourselves, then gradually the people around each of us will benefit from it, even though I may not see that you have a lot of money. Perhaps many practitioners live simple, unremarkable lives without much material wealth. But as for their level of spiritual attainment, perhaps at a certain point they possess a certain power. This power, in different corners of the world, will have a profound effect, will shine forth brightly, and will illuminate the entire world around them. So, what was just mentioned, when the Buddha went on his alms rounds, everyone should understand that there were actually many profound and significant meanings behind it. When he did this at that particular time, it increased merit and eliminated obstacles. Even those who saw, heard, or came into contact with him received temporary and ultimate benefit. There were many merits and meanings to it. Well, we are. Everyone is listening very attentively. Why are you all so focused? Because of the oral exam, right? My oral exam will soon become their oral exam. First I will do the oral exam, then it's their turn. Some people still haven't had their turn for the oral exam. Right now they're thinking, it won't be my turn, it's fine. Some people feel this way. It'll be fine, no problem. Even if it's your turn, it'll be in a small group. In a larger group, it won't happen. But that's not true. Back in 1986, when the precious Guru was teaching the Vinaya, and in 1987, when he was teaching Buddhist logic, at that time, he would personally draw lots. Every time I read the book seriously, I was never picked. I felt really sad about that. But every time I wasn't prepared, I would get picked. Now, moving on. Just now we mentioned that the Buddha had already gone out to beg for alms for his sustenance. At that particular time in the ancient city of Rajagriha, that is to say, in the ancient city of Rajgir, there was a certain son of a prominent and respected elder. Generally, the term elder can mean donor, merchant, or have many other meanings. In any case, it refers to someone with prestige, wisdom, and capability. In India, they are all commonly called elders, showing respect. His name was Shansheng, which translates to good birth. He started out of the city in the morning, left Rajgir. Then he went to the beautiful gardens just outside the city to sightsee and explore. Upon his arrival at the destination, he proceeded to take a refreshing bath. After he had completely finished his thorough bathing, his entire body was thoroughly soaked through. Perhaps he was immersed in the water, and then paid homage to the 6 directions. What are the 6 directions? East and west, south and north, above and below. For each direction, some commentaries say he bowed 4 times. In Buddhism, we usually bow 3 times. However, he bowed 4 distinct times in each cardinal direction. What needs to be brought to attention here, as a primary point of emphasis, is some commentaries say that he bathed himself first before doing anything else. After bathing, he then meticulously put on his brand new clothes and then paid homage to all of the 6 directions. This is also mentioned in the translation of the Madhyama Agama, the version that was translated by G. Phadu, where it clearly states he put on some new clothes, but it's unclear whether this is due to differences among later compilers or if it's because the Sanskrit versions are different. The difference is insignificant. There are 2 possibilities. One possibility is that after bathing, he immediately changed into his clean clothes, and then, following the Brahmin custom, paid homage to the 6 directions. This is one scenario. On the other hand, because there are many, many ponds around Rajgir, and even now there are still many pools of water, many places where the Buddha used to bathe, and places where arhats bathed as well. When we arrived at that location, they informed us that His Holiness should proceed to perform a sacred bathing ritual. At that time, we didn't go in directly, but His Holiness symbolically recited some mantras there, washed his face and washed his feet. It was like this at that time as well. Around Rajgir, I forget exactly, but it should be recorded in my travel notes from that time, just how many there were. There were a great many. So perhaps, since India is generally a remarkably hot country, and also in accordance with some traditional Brahmin customs and practices, whether in the waters of the Ganges or in ordinary rivers, people would often bathe first. After bathing, they would pay homage to the deities of the 10 directions. There is such a tradition, and here the directions, east, south, west, north, etc., refer to paying homage to the 6 directions. As for the 6 direction homage, they pay their respects to the deities of the 6 directions. They do this in the earnest hopes of gaining extended longevity and abundant wealth, just like many people in the world today. So which deities are these 6 directional gods? In the East, it is generally considered to be Indra. Usually for the East, they pay homage to the mighty deity Indra. For the West, it is called Varuna, who is said to be a dragon king, a Naga deity. In the South, it is Yama. In the northern regions, it is commonly called Kubera. Kubera is a different type of a deity from Maheshvara. He is truly the deity of the north. The deity of the upper direction is called Vayu, the wind god. The principal deity of the lower direction is Agni, the revered fire god. These are the wind and fire gods among the 4 fundamental elements: earth, water, fire, and wind. According to their ancient customs, they pay homage in this specific and traditional way. But actually, such acts of homage, in the Upasaka Precept Sutra, there is also a youth named Shansheng who pays homage to the 6 directions. In fact, the content there is quite similar to what is described here. However, in the Upasaka Precept Sutra, it also contains some elements of Mahayana Buddhism and discusses them in much greater detail. So here, just now, this son of a householder, with deep reverence, paid homage to the 6 cardinal directions. At this time, the world-honored one clearly saw this son of a householder. Shansheng arrived at the tranquil grove and first took a refreshing bath. Then, while still completely dripping wet from the water, he meticulously made 4 prostrations to each of his 6 cardinal directions. This particular action is quite similar to what was mentioned earlier in the narrative, where Buddhist scriptures often repeat similar content. When we speak in daily life, we also tend to repeat certain things, which is sometimes necessary. After witnessing this, the world-honored one immediately went over and asked Shansheng, for what specific reason or underlying cause has this situation arisen? Did you leave the city gates early in the morning and then come to the grove? Why did you, while still soaking wet, prostrate to the 6 directions? The Buddha asked this question, inquiring about the cause and conditions. Actually, the Buddha was asking while already knowing the answer. He already knew precisely what the cause and conditions were. At this particular point, he should have clearly known the reason behind it. Here, it may seem like a coincidence, but in reality it was inevitable. For some of us, whether we study Buddhism or choose to become monastics or take refuge, it may seem like you just happened to meet a certain teacher. Or perhaps you came across some information online, and after signing up, you immediately began studying. But perhaps this is actually a manifestation of the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, or the result of your own virtuous roots and the ripening of your karmic connections. That's precisely why you now have these new opportunities available. It seems as if the son of Shansheng and the Buddha just happened to come into town to beg for alms, and the son of Shansheng went out to the garden. In some of the translations, the part about going to the garden is omitted. It just says that when he came out, he met the Buddha. There are versions like this, but regardless of the details, at that particular time, the Buddha himself asked him, and there were also some other significant details at that moment, including, for instance, in the Madhyama Agama Sutra, for example, and so on. This conversation is also recorded. Who are you? Are you a Shramana or a Brahmana? What are you studying? He also asked some other questions at that time. There are slight differences, but the main content is essentially the same. So, what exactly do we observe here? We clearly see that at that particular time, the Buddha encountered him through a truly remarkable and very coincidental opportunity. But in reality, the Buddha was fully intent on liberating this sentient being. The Buddha even left behind such sacred scriptures, relying on this kind of karmic connection, and thus he arrived at this place. This was because the Buddha's profound and compassionate work for all sentient beings with whom he had a deep and enduring connection has truly never ceased or changed throughout time. He has always cared for sentient beings. This is also mentioned in the Tibetan texts. Even if the tides of the great ocean miss their appointed time, we've used this before, right? It's from the Vinaya of the Sarvastivada. The Buddha's liberation of those he teaches never misses its time. This means that as for the tides of the great ocean in our world, it's quite possible for them to miss their appointed time. But when it comes to the Buddha and the sentient beings he teaches, the karmic connection for liberation will truly never ever become outdated, nor will he ever fail to liberate them. As long as there are sentient beings with the right karmic connection, he will liberate them. That is precisely why Khenchen Jigme Phuntsok Rinpoche also very often liked to quote this particular scriptural proof. I think it's also one of the significant entries in 365 diamonds. But some of you don't seem to truly value diamonds very much. You seem to care much more about crystal prayer beads. Just kidding, I think I've quoted this before. So indeed, the profound karmic connections for the Buddha to effectively liberate sentient beings at that particular time were truly and utterly inconceivable, weren't they? At that time, when the Buddha asked this question, Shansheng replied saying, at that particular time, Shansheng addressed the Buddha, when my father sadly passed away, he thoughtfully left me some final instructions, a detailed will. As for his actual last words, those were the specific instructions he left for me at that particular time. He said that if I wanted to pay homage in the future, I should start with the East. According to our tradition, first the East, then the South, West, North, above and below. I must pay homage to these deities. I have followed the instructions my father left me and dared not disobey them. So, after bathing, I first put my palms together. With my palms together, I contemplated for quite a while. But perhaps it was like this. Because in India, especially within the waters of the Ganges River, it's quite a common practice observed among some people. The way we Buddhists traditionally join our palms together is fundamentally the same. It's just that the fingers are interlaced with each other in this particular manner. Many of them, when they are in the Ganges, worship in this manner. It is not like how we Buddhists typically perform our practices. It seems like they always hold their hands above their heads. They worship in this very particular way. So perhaps at that time he first put his hands together and bowed to the east. Facing directly east, he reverently paid homage to the various deities of the east. Then, turning his attention to the south, west, north, and also to the realms above and below, he would meticulously pay homage to all these directions. Therefore, I diligently followed and embraced my father's teachings and worshipped according to his last wishes. So from this we can also clearly see that in fact at that time this elder's son, after his father sadly passed away, faithfully followed his father's last wishes and instructions and acted accordingly and properly. Nowadays many young people might not do this, especially those who go to study abroad in the West. They don't really care about what their father or mother told them. Basically, they won't even mention it. They immediately sell off whatever their parents left behind for money and then start doing all sorts of things themselves. As for the words and advice left to me by my father and mother, they might even take a critical attitude towards them. They might say, oh, so that's what my father used to say. But actually he wasn't educated and didn't really understand things. Unlike us intellectuals, who are truly so knowledgeable and deeply learned. Last year, when we studied the Sutra of Filial Piety, we also clearly saw and understood that in ancient times people had great respect for their parents. The teachings left by parents were also considered very precious, and likewise, in ancient times, the teachings left by one's guru were also highly valued. Whatever my guru said, including nowadays, even in the secular world, if a doctor says something, or if my master says something, but now we are indeed overly focused on what is often referred to as equality and an excessive degree of freedom, which can sometimes lead to unintended consequences. With some rather appealing ideas, such as the fundamental principle that everyone is truly equal, and the crucial concept that all speech is absolutely free. Of course, freedom is a good thing, but sometimes, if there is complete freedom, it may not necessarily mean that one's own wisdom can truly come into play. So from this, I can also see that the son of a Brahmin, after his father passed away, still continued to worship his deity. At this particular moment, the Blessed One, the revered teacher, told the son of the elder, these names for directions exist. They are not non-existent. The names you use for directions, east, south, west, north, and are not without meaning. They do exist. The Buddha spoke in a very skillful and tactful way, not saying, your way of worship is wrong, or this is meaningless. Unlike some of our fellow practitioners, this is heretical. You can't do that. If you do this, you'll end up in hell. Some of us are just too blunt, without any skillful means at all. We often don't truly know how to properly read the room, and in the end we just make things incredibly awkward for ourselves and for others involved. When the Buddha taught, he said that these directions do exist, and it's not that they don't. This is also quite acceptable. He explained it in a way that was quite comfortable and very pleasant to hear. But in my virtuous and noble teaching, it's not just about simply bowing to the 6 directions or showing profound respect to the 6 directions with a truly reverent heart. It's not like that at all. because what precisely follows is the deep and significant meaning that the Buddha himself explained. So what exactly is being discussed here? The main point below is that paying respect involves body, speech, and mind. All these aspects should be included in the prostration. But even in the process of prostrating, there are many details, including not just bowing physically, but also having a respectful heart. And when you act to pay respect to the 10 directions, you will need to do 6 major things. This will also be explained in much greater detail further below. So, the Buddha said to this young man, if you only practice this kind of ritual, there may actually be even more to it than meets the eye. That's why sometimes people have different levels and abilities in various aspects. Some people, even if they disagree, they won't say it directly. They might say, oh, in this particular area, you still have a significant amount of room for considerable improvement. There are still many aspects where you truly have great potential. Some Western scholars, for example, also tend to use very much more tactful language. Originally, your viewpoint might be incorrect, but they won't actually say it directly. They might say, this way of thinking is also one way to look at it. But in another aspect, if you think about it more deeply, perhaps there is even more significant room for further development. I would suggest that you read another comprehensive book. In this way, for your future research and for your so-called future academic achievements, I think it will provide you with some truly useful guidance. Of course, what I'm saying may not necessarily be entirely accurate indeed. I just thought of someone's face, so I tried to imitate him a bit. Next it says, Shan Shengzi respectfully asked, if I pay respects in this way, are there other ways to do it? I sincerely hope, world-honored one, that you can kindly and thoroughly explain to me in your profound Buddhist teachings regarding the 6 directions that are mentioned in the teachings of the sages and saints. Could you please explain them in detail to me? Then I can truly put them into practice in my life. At this very moment, the Buddha said to the elder's son, listen carefully, and reflect well upon what I am about to tell you. So listen carefully, really listen attentively, and make sure you remember it well. If you have a pen, write it down. Nowadays, many people don't even need to be told to listen carefully. They're already very attentive. Listen carefully. This means to hear, to listen. Then, reflect well refers to contemplation after hearing. And remember, it means to put it into practice. Of course, in Tibetan, it seems that the term practice might not be included, but the meaning can be interpreted this way. So, in the past, His Holiness would say, when we are giving teachings, everyone below must listen attentively. If you don't listen carefully, it's like pouring water onto an upturned vessel. There will be no benefit at all. Listening attentively is very important. But just listening attentively is not enough either. Simply sitting there motionless the whole time is not sufficient either. You need to remember every sentence in your heart. You should remember the words in your heart and also remember the meaning. Among our Dharma friends who take the exams, some are quite good at remembering the meaning. Some are better at remembering the words. Some just grab a bit here and a bit there roughly. If you say that they don't remember anything, well, they still remember something. If you say it's correct, it's not quite right. If you say it's not right, it seems correct. When carefully analyzing, some individuals add a little bit here and there, take a bit from the scriptures, a bit from what I said, and then add a bit of their own, like 8 treasure porridge. The content that they talk about is all sorts of different things indeed. That's perfectly fine, because we are not arhats. After all, you see, being able to remember even this much is already not easy, especially since sometimes I might speak a bit quickly. When I speak quickly, you might not be able to keep up. Of course, remembering the exact words isn't that important. Remember it in your heart. After remembering it in your heart, reflect on it yourself. After reflecting, when the time is right, the true meaning of the Buddhist scriptures will have already merged into your own continuum. It will have blended together with your own blood. At that point, the unwavering understanding and wisdom not swayed by others arises. That is precisely why we very often suggest that everyone should truly listen to more teachings and study more. The more, the better it is. And it's even much better if you can consistently do it for a longer period of time. Some people say, I've studied for 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, but it's not enough. The meaning in the Buddhist scriptures is extremely profound. 10 years, 8 years, even 20 years. The senior practitioners and elder Dharma teachers from previous generations spent their entire lives studying, listening, and contemplating. We must have a long-term mindset. It should become increasingly helpful for our own personal spiritual practice and daily lives. Therefore, the Buddha, with great wisdom and compassion, addressed the son of the elder, instructing him, listen very carefully, with full attention, and contemplate deeply and thoroughly on these teachings. The Buddha said, I'm about to expound the teaching. So in our very next class, we will carefully listen together with the esteemed son of the elder and attentively consider his words to how the Buddha truly expounds the Dharma. In fact, we actually have a very special connection. This is something extremely hard to obtain in eons. The unsurpassed, profound, and subtle Dharma is hard to encounter in hundreds of thousands of eons. It is rarely encountered, yet now I can see, hear, receive, and uphold it. Now in this degenerate age, we are once again able to see, hear, and contact with such teachings. We also truly hope to deeply understand the Buddha's profound and ultimate intent. If this is indeed the case, then in this very lifetime, we will never be swayed or affected by the 8 worldly concerns. This is absolutely certain. All right, we will stop our quick session here for today, for now.
Bandara Badna Sadarda Bandara Badna Sada Bandara Badna Sadarda